Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome to my long-running but sporadic series where I go out and buy a piece of gear that I normally wouldn't buy. It's kind of a fun series as I get to kind of discover what everybody else knows about these models. You know, they're iconic for a reason, but for whatever reason, I never personally really connected with them. So in the past, we've done a Jazzmaster, a Gretsch Big Body, and most recently a Charvel. There's probably some others, but basically I go out and buy these guitars knowing that they have, you know, a pretty good cult following, and I kind of get to discover, yeah, like I said, what people love about those instruments. So it's pretty fun, and today what we're gonna do is look at an amp. And you don't need to know much about guitar amps if you're anywhere around the guitar world. You know exactly what this is. I'm going to try to not have it fall on me. This is one of the heaviest overbuilt amps I've ever used. It's not super big in dimension, but it is a heavy beast. So yes, this is the orange Rocker Verb. Let's take a closer look at this amp. So here's what I ended up buying. This is the orange Rocker Verb 50. Now, why did I never connect with orange, and what have I learned since owning one? Well, here we go. I'm just going to zoom out a bit so you can see the full cab. Now, as I mentioned, this thing is insanely over-engineered. The plywood is, you know, insanely thick. The head itself is ridiculously heavy to lug anywhere, and it's going to survive the nuclear holocaust. This thing is just an absolute beast. Now, why did I never connect with the brand orange? Well, it really came down to two things. Number one, the looks are just so in your face. There's nothing subtle about this in any way, and it's just so incredibly quirky. We'll get into that in a second, but it really had to do with the aesthetics. I wanted something a little bit more understated, maybe a little bit more classic, especially if I was gonna buy, you know, a tube amp. The tube amps are just expensive. So if you have a limited budget, which I did for, you know, my whole playing career, I just went with something a little bit more classic. So that was one thing. Now the second thing is, I'm just gonna zoom in here a little bit, and it has to do with the controls and the labeling of the controls. Now, on my version of the Rocker Verb, I have the labeling underneath. So verb, volume, treble, middle, bass, gain. But there are a lot of orange amps that do not have that. So literally, if I cover that up, all you're left with is these incredibly cryptic and not really well labeled symbols. You know, like, do I want to decipher that, you know, a jagged waveform with an arrow is my gain control? No, I want an amp that's clean and clear and easy to understand right away. I don't want to learn a bunch of symbols. So anyway, those were the two kind of like big hurdles for me, but I took a chance anyway, and yeah, everything about this amp is just, it just oozes character. I mean, even when you look at the little orange kind of emblem in the top right corner here, it's all just super quirky. There's this like a goat dude with horns wiping his hands with a towel. There's like a barrel with lettuce all over it. There's some lady in a flag. You know, the only thing that really makes sense are scales on an ocean or something like that. And yeah, the only thing that really makes sense is the orange tree, but it all just oozes character. So what did I learn about this amp after having used it for a few months? Well, like every other orange user, I learned it does this. So yeah, that's what orange amps are capable of. You know, distortion with character. That's really what it comes down to. If I dial that back to about 12 o'clock, I had the mids cut a little bit. Even with the mids cut, this thing just has so many mids, and that really is what gives it its character. If we just play, yeah, something with some gain at 12 o'clock here. You know, every note just has character unlike any other amp. And if you don't trust me, when I first got this amp, I did a little shootout between the Orange, the Marshall, and the Boogie. And yeah, this amp just stood out. So if you play primarily with like overdriven tones to super high gain, this amp just dominates. I think if you play with a lot of distortion, this would actually be one of my first choices. It just does everything from like light bluesy breakup, like we're listening to here. Still maybe a bit much for light bluesy breakup, but anyway, let's do that and turn the volume up. EQ, yeah, everything's pretty much at 12 o'clock here. You know, that kind of stuff all the way to like searing and melt your face off and everything in between. 12 o'clock I think is probably pretty good for like classic rock kind of stuff. So I mean, every gain stage is so cool on this amp. It is incredibly mid-heavy, so like I mentioned, even when you take your mids down, it's still going to give you all that, yeah, orangey goodness. Let's check out the clean channel. All right, so I've got the clean channel engaged. I've got a Mexican-made Strat here. Let's just play some chords up high. You know, so a nice clean tone. Now there isn't a lot of versatility. The dirty channel here has, you know, the full 3-band EQ, volume, gain, all that kind of stuff. On the clean channel, you've just got one volume, bass and treble. And I have my treble up just a little bit, but yeah, there's not a lot going on for the clean channel. So I think maybe using some pedals for, you know, you could hear some delay on my signal here. Right, so I've got some delay on there. And some verb, that kind of stuff, just to kind of sweeten that channel up, because as I mentioned, it's super basic. Now, as soon as you take your volume past 12, I'm at 12 o'clock right now, you're going to start breaking up. So if I just go to, I don't know, somewhere between 12 o'clock and about 3/4 volume here, you'll probably hear some breakup. I'll push it even a little bit harder here. So clean channel, especially if you have humbuckers, like if you're playing through a Les Paul or something like that. You know, it starts to really, really saturate and you get lots of kind of sustain, even on these single coils here. So for me, that kind of sums up what this amp is all about. It's the ultimate overdriven tone machine. There's not a bad gain stage on this amp, right? From breakup all the way to searing, melt your face off. It's all awesome. And that's what I really appreciate about this amp, having got to know it over the previous few months. But if you need something that's like really pristine and ultra crunchy and, you know, really, really bright, well, you might not want to go with this amp. But if you need something, like I said, with some incredible character, thick, sustainy, you know, crazy overtones, this amp has it in spades. Now, if you want a great clean tone, again, I probably wouldn't go with this amp, you know, go with something like a Fender or Vox or something where you can just get that, yeah, that beautiful shimmery highs. This amp, you can kind of compensate. Like I said, I added some verb and some delay and kind of that kind of stuff, boosted the treble a little bit to try to get some of that chime. And I thought it sounded good, like very, very serviceable. but not like the ultimate clean tone. But when it comes to overdrive, this amp just rules. And as I mentioned, when I did that comparison between the Marshall, between the Boogie and this amp, it really showed what this amp is all about, because sometimes it's hard to, get in isolation what this amp is, or any really piece of gear, which is why I do lots of comparisons on this channel, so that there's something to kind of measure up against. But yes, this amp, full of mids, full of character. If you play primarily overdriven, I can recommend this amp very, very easily. If you play mostly clean, I would probably choose something else. So am I gonna keep it long term? Am I gonna just sell it and move it on? Well, for me, I'm gonna keep this amp because it does something that none of my other amps do. Namely, insane sustain, great lead lines, great rhythm. So it's got, just a tone all its own, and it's a really cool amp. So there you guys go. I hope you enjoyed my quick look at the orange Rock Reverb 50. Not an amp I ever saw myself buying before, but really came to love. That quirky British slice of tone. I will link to this amp in the video description below. You can check out the specs there, the back panel, all the connections and all that kind of stuff. But I just wanted to share, what I learned about this amp over the last few months, and really came to appreciate what it brings to the table. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. All my information is down in the video description below. You can check out the t-shirt store, tab store, all that stuff is down there. Other than that, have yourself a great week. Take care.